Welcome to another edition of the Coach's Corner. This is the part of the podcast where I get to share with you some tips that might hopefully make your pool journey more rewarding. Demetrius Jelatis here with mnpoolbootcamp.com. You can check me out online, www.mnpoolbootcamp.com, where I do training for players across the country that want to take their game to the next level. 3-day sessions. Go home a different player. Okay, so this week I want to get back. I had a great question from a student that wanted to know one of the challenges, and this is a challenge we all face as we get better. What do you do when you're playing weaker players more and more often? How do you stay focused when you're playing weaker players? Because this player was explaining to me that they'd play really hard for the first, X number of games. Maybe it was 3 games, maybe it was 10, where they'd run out, beat the player. And then it seems like after a little while, they're like, okay, I beat this guy like a drum. I ran out a bunch of racks. Now, they just kind of lose focus. And then oftentimes they'd start playing down to the level of their opponent, and they would end up with a session that was just not as rewarding and not as fun. They're not getting better, and it's just kind of meh. And so they're like, what do I do? I know that there's something I got to be doing wrong here. And so this is a very important question because, like I said, as you get better, this is going to be more and more. So it's something I've struggled with a lot. So here's what I told him. I said, there's kind of a 2-pronged attack to this thing. The first thing is you have to understand, you have to be able to use a different fuel source. So this kind of speaks to a little bit about, I'll throw back to my last couple where I was talking about, process goals versus result goals. And this is a great time to talk about how that can be applicable, because if you have a result goal, which is to win, well, that just doesn't provide enough fuel because it doesn't really look like the outcome is dealt with. So then you're like, well, I'm going to win. So therefore, what's really pushing me if I'm not afraid of losing? And this is where if you have process goals where you're focused on trying to, play correctly or play good patterns, or if you're playing for other reasons. So, and this is not just about goals, it's also about motivation, but there's a lot of overlap between the two. But what are you trying to do at the table? If you're just trying to win, then you're not asking for enough from yourself. So you really have to be focused on your process and find that as a goal. And then as far as the motivation, one thing that I've discovered, I'll tell you a story about where I discovered that playing weaker players can actually reveal a lot, is that when I grew up playing, players in my pool hall that were good did not play for fun. They all played for money, and they were contemptuous of fun. They thought they were above playing for fun. This was the 90s, and they would walk around and say things like, well, does a plumber go home and fix his bathtub for fun? And things like that. They just sneered about it. They wouldn't put their cue together for less than 100. And so I kind of grew up in that culture, and I was a money player. And then when I got a little bit older and not as many players wanted to play me for money, or I wanted to find different fuel sources for myself besides beating a guy and winning the cash. And so there was a period, though, where when I would play guys for practice, I might not play as well. I might play down to their level. I might not be as focused. I'd get lazy. I'd miss some shots. And then what the thought that would go through my head is I would be frustrated, and I'd be like, man, I would never have missed that ball. If I was playing for money, I would have made that ball. If I was playing for money, I would have run those balls. Like, when I'm playing for money, I've got pressure on me. I've got adrenaline pumping. My focus is higher. I'm in survival mode, and I just perform better. And so it was really, when I would play poorly or when I'd make mistakes, it would be very easy to dismiss those and to be irritated to like, man, I just wish I could give this guy a spot and we could bet something, and I wouldn't have missed that ball. And that's not a good attitude. And I'll admit that I had that, thought, because I was trying to learn a different way. But one day I made a discovery that changed the way I look at playing for fun. And what that discovery was that while it's true that I would probably play better for money, I still made mistakes and missed balls. And so then the question came up, why that ball? Why that mistake? I understand that I'm not going to play as good playing for fun, but why when I play bad, why was it that was the shot I missed and that was the way I missed it? And what I started to discover was my game has strengths and weaknesses. And so while it's true that with more hunger in my belly, I might have been able to overcome those weaknesses. When I'm playing for fun and I lose focus, I didn't lose focus and make mistake A. I didn't lose focus and make mistake B because I'm so good at A and B that that's just not where I broke down. But when I made mistakes X, Y, and Z, if I missed a certain type of shot or if I misplayed a certain type of position, how come I misplayed that type of position? And what I realized was, yes, it's true that if I'd been betting, maybe I wouldn't have made that mistake. Still showed me that was the weakest point of my game because my game broke down somewhere, and that's where it happened to break down. And then furthermore, I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, it's true that I typically play better under pressure. There are also times that I don't play well under pressure. Pressure can go both ways. It can make you play better, and it can also make you play worse. It accentuates what you're feeling. And so, yes, a lot of times my best pool that I've ever played has been under pressure. But also some of the worst pool I've ever played has been under pressure. And I've had some glorious meltdowns. And I realized that when I'm under a lot of pressure and I don't perform, then my game breaks down in very, very similar spots to where it breaks down when I'm playing for fun against weaker players. And that was really, really eye-opening to me to realize I can't simply say I would have made that if I was playing in a tournament. Instead, I have to say, if I was playing in a tournament and really, really fighting in the finals and feeling a lot of doubt and fear and nerves, I bet you I would have made the exact same mistake. And so I started looking at playing for fun as a simulation for playing under pressure when it wasn't a good pressure, when I was fighting. And I used that as a litmus test for saying, as a really like a black light to expose the flaws in my game, to say, I know I can play good for money when I'm feeling good, but how do I play when I'm breaking down? This is a good simulation for how I play when I'm breaking down. And it allowed, so I started taking, once I had that shift in mindset, it allowed me to take it way more seriously because I can't just dismiss this and say I wouldn't make that mistake playing for cash. It's like, yes, I might. And I need to work on these. So that was the process goal that I set. And that was the motivation I used, which is this is the way I will play when I'm playing under pressure at times. And therefore my process goal is to try to work on these leaks right here, right now, so that I can win when I get in the ring. The only other thing that I would say, so that was the two-pronged attack. That was the main point, which is shifting your motivation and shifting your goals, being motivated by understanding that this is going to mimic your finals performance sometimes, and then focusing on the process of where you break down. As far as the other prong, it's pretty simple, which is that you have to adjust your expectations to reality. A lot of what I talk about, my whole mental game approach is a reality-based approach, reality-based. A lot of players aren't realistic. And so what I mean by that is you have to adjust your expectations to reality. So if you believe champion player is somebody that when they're in the clutch can dig deep, kick up their game, and come with some amazing shots and play some inspired pool, and I think most of us believe that, then you can't also say that a champion is always consistent, because consistency and elevating your game during the clutch contradict each other. If a champion is supposed to be consistent, then that means that they don't elevate their game in the clutch. They play the same way all the time. But if they can elevate their game in the clutch, then that implies that that's a level of play that they don't always bring. And so you can't have the best of both worlds. And so I do believe that we're all humans and we're not robots, and we're not champions because we always play perfect. Well, we're champions because we get the job done in the clutch a lot of the time, not all the time, but that we also play hard all the time and play, fairly steady. But so what I'm saying is that we can't expect ourselves to play as good playing weaker opponents and playing for fun as we will when we're playing opponents that are better when it matters to us and we know that we can't get away with a mistake. You can't expect from yourself the same level of performance. It's not realistic. So if you do expect that from yourself, then you're going to be very frustrated, and whatever problems you have on the table are going to be exacerbated by your frustration, your impatience, your self-criticism, this negative spiral of setting the bar to where you can't hit it. So I would just say, be a little patient and tolerant with yourself, and know that while you can shift your goals to process goals, and while you can use for motivation this idea that this is going to be how you play in the finals someday when you're struggling, that's great. But then you also have to be patient with yourself and understand that it's probably not going to equate to the same level of output as if you were in a tournament playing a good player. And so you can try your hardest to patch up those leaks, but when you don't always do it, be a little patient with yourself and budget for that, so that you're not adding to your leaks by adding a layer of frustration, disappointment, and criticism. All of these things don't spawn into better play. So, and then one recommendation. So that's the tips on how I do it. Adjust your expectations to lower your expectations just a little, and then try your best to make the best of a tough situation. My last tip that has nothing to do with this, but this goes back to managing your career, which is this is why it's important to manage your career. Because while it's true that you're going to put in some time playing on your own, while it's true you're going to put in some time playing weaker players, you can't play weaker players all the time and realistically expect to improve and push yourself. And so, while it's definitely, you need to put in hours and you need to play better players. And you can't always get both the hours and the better players the same. You can't always play 20 hours a week against better players. But that's, if you can only play against better players 2 hours a week, then you can get your hours playing against the weaker players, but you got to make sure you get your time against the better players when you can. So when you play weaker players, adjust your expectations to reality. Do your best to make the best of a tough situation by motivating yourself, understanding this is going to be your finals performance, using this as a spotlight on the weaker parts of your game. But then also plan for that and make sure that that's not the entirety of your pool time. That's what I've got on that. So great question. Thank you very much. Any questions, you can email me directly at info@mnpoolbootcamp.com. Thanks again.
Absolutely.